My honor and great pleasure to introduce to you this evening my dear friend Mukhtar Husain's hot off the press memoirs, Foundations and Form. These memoirs cover the nearly 80-year period from 1945 to the present, describing the life, times, and works of architect and designer Mukhtar Husain. Born in Karachi in 1950, Mukhtar studied architecture in Turkey in the 1960s, after which he returned to Karachi in 1973 and worked as chief architect at Zor Engineers and NESPAC, and as the executive director of the Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture. In 1997, he set up his own practice, FNMH Architecture, and worked on landmark projects for the AKU, UBL, and IBA. His latest major project was the design of the Turkish consulate complex in Karachi. Married to Romana Hussain since 1977, he is the father of 2 children and the grandfather of 3. Mukhtar lives in Karachi and continues to be an active member of the architectural and civic community. I wanted to say a little bit about the book, but I really couldn't improve on the lovely, succinct foreword written by Arif Hassan. So with his permission, I'm actually going to read a little bit from that. Although the book's title is Foundations and Form, this book is much more. It is a story lovingly told of people, places, and events captured from a very rich and active life. The foundations were laid before the birth of the author in Indore, where his father's family originated, Ujjain, where his mother came from, and in the partition of India and the impact it had on its family. The partition brought his parents to Karachi, where Mukhtar was born, grew up, married, worked, and has lived. Mukhtar describes Karachi of the 50s and 60s, the physical and social environment of the time, the schools he went to, the teachers who taught him, and his fellow students and friends, some of whom became icons and others who emerged as the most powerful men in the country. He also describes his life at the Middle East Technical University in Ankara, his association with academic institutions, professional bodies, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, as well as the impact of global events such as the Vietnam War, the 1965 war, and the separation of East Pakistan. So it is a book about life, history, Karachi, the region, and Mukhtar's professional life. Acha Mukhtar Sahab, one of the things that came up in conversation with you recently was that almost no prominent architect in Pakistan has written a memoir. So what prompted you to write one? How did this come about?
I have 3 lovely grandchildren. My son Adil, his wife Ruhi, and their 2 daughters. They live in the US. And our daughter Asma, who is also an architect, her husband Benoit, who is a photographer, and their son Etienne. They live in Paris. This book is primarily dedicated to them in order to apprise them of their roots and background and family history, and the legacy that they will carry forward, starting from my father and grandfather and the background that they belong to. The second main reason is that I see myself as a citizen, a professional citizen of Karachi, and that relationship is important because that's where I grew up, imbibed a lot of my thinking and outlook. And at this stage in my life, I owe it to the city to think about it, think on its problems and issues, and where possible and if possible, offer solutions. The book is not a project, it's really a story, a life story, and I think it's got all kinds of aspects. It's gossipy, it's casual, it's rambling, It's about Pakistan, it's about Turkey, it's about the many countries that I've traveled or lived for long periods in. But back again and again, we come to Karachi and look at Karachi, and sometimes with admiration, sometimes with disgust. But that's where we belong.
There is an unusual and very moving section at the end of your book that you've titled Reflections, and I think it nicely encapsulates what you tried to do with the book. I would love for you to read something from that.
Let me try. It's not very long. It kind of summarizes my thinking and relationship with the book itself. This chronicle of the ever-changing tides of time, spanning from the momentous 1945 to the present, is etched upon the canvas of my memory, with vivid recollections amassed over the years. With a sense of humble reverence, I have mustered the courage to offer this record, interwoven with my own observations and evolving worldview, for your perusal and contemplation. Fortune has favored me in countless ways, for which I am filled with gratitude. Though beset by my own flaws and foibles, I have been bestowed with innumerable chances and opportunities that have crossed my path, and have learnt a lesson or two from each engagement. Some opportunities I have seized with gusto, while others have slipped through my fingers. Yet, I have also narrowly evaded the clutches of tragedy, often by a mere whisker, and for that I count myself fortunate indeed. All of which has instilled in me a particular outlook for reviewing the past, dealing with the present, and looking forward to the future with a mix of caution and the daredevil combined. Thank you for your patience.
Acha, one of the, I would almost say that a central character in the book who's there throughout more than even your family and even yourself is the city of Karachi. We have mentioned this theme, but aap thoda sa bataiye, you know, there are detailed narratives in the book about your personal move from locality to locality and your different homes in the city. That's a story that I think would be interesting for the audience. Where you grew up, making the house in Nazmabad, moving to Defense.
There's a time scale and there's a space or place relationship. I was born in the old city. The first 15 years I lived in a government colony on Garden Road, just off Emigina Road. Garden Road was at that time in the 50s one of the cleanest, finest, smartest roads in town, with the police headquarters on one side, the zoo at the end from where we could actually hear the lions roaring in the evening, and a beautiful enclave with little traffic, a large number of tall trees, walking pathways, and it was just lovely being there. As we walked from Garden Road towards Bandar Road, at the corner of Bandar Road was the American Embassy at that time. At the next corner was the American Library. The first traffic light installed in Karachi was at that corner. And that's where we used to come and go back and forth. And I spent so many years enjoying that ambience. We moved from Garden Road to Bahadurabad, 406 Bahadurabad. I remember the flat where we lived, and Kamran would remember that neighborhood very well. And that is, we were living in Bahadurabad when the 1965 war erupted. So my experience of a very particular aspect of Karachi goes back in that context. From 406 Bahadurabad, we moved to Amir Khusro Road. which is also called Bahadurabad, but blocks 7 and 8. Quite different in texture and character. Whereas in the earlier Bahadurabad, we were neighbors to the American club. The Salatin club was right there. And American servicemen, diplomats were moving around. Can you imagine a Karachi where Americans are moving around freely in today's context? From Amir Khusro Road, we moved to North Nazimabad. 25 years of my life, especially from the time I came back from Turkey until the mid-90s, we were living in North Nazimabad. To begin with, it was a beautifully designed, well-planned, neat, clean neighborhood, right next to the hills. There wasn't a single hut on those hills in those days. I've actually climbed those hills on occasion and enjoyed the vista. And when Javed Jabbar made his film Beyond the Last Mountain, he actually chalked the emblem on the hillside. Now that's all Kachi Abadi and Basti, and it's a different world altogether. In 96, we moved from North Nazimabad to Defence. Nazimabad is one world, and Defence is a completely different world. It's a different experience, it's a different way of living, it's a different people and different helpers. And there are the people who are living inside the houses is one category, the people who are living on the street is another category. And nobody knows their next door neighbor. This is peculiar, isn't it? But it gives you it has given me an insight and also a sense of responsibility to try and understand and make sense of this and see myself and my position in the scheme of things. I'll go back a little further. I start my story with my father in 1945 when he went in an American troop ship to the United States to do his master's in civil engineering. When he came back, Pakistan had been created and he was given the options. He chose to become a Pakistani. And he came and settled in Karachi, and he was involved in much of the planning and development of the city and the waterways and roads. The big broad road in North Nazimabad, which goes on to North Karachi and Surjani and Tesar town and beyond, would not be possible if it had not been planned the way it was. So these things have been part of my growing up, and I've imbibed some of those features, reacted to some of those things, compared them with what happens in other countries, sometimes admired what we've done, sometimes felt sorry about it. Whereas Karachi was the capital of Pakistan in my early childhood, it lost that position and became just another city, ignored, mismanaged, well, whatever. क्या बोलें कराची के बारे में?
नहीं, I'm going to push that theme further. इसके बारे में मैं आपसे और पूछूंगी. इस कमरे में तो आपके पुराने दोस्त बहुत बैठे हैं.
सारे हैं.
हाँ, उनको मालूम होगा. लेकिन I've known you for years और मुझे हाल में ही पता चला that you were the chief architect for Karachi Airport, and I really enjoyed that section of the book. What was it like to work for the state, to work on such an enormous and important, symbolically as well as technically important project for the city?
Well, let me go a little bit back. I started working in Karachi in 1973. I was 23 years old. I'd already completed my master's, traveled all over Europe, come back to work. My first job was about 9 years with a construction company, which gave me the chance to travel all over Pakistan and do projects in small towns in Sindh, Punjab, NWFP. It also taught me how to appreciate workers, their labor, their output, and their hardship. My second job was with Nesbak, At the age of 34, I was given the responsibility of managing the Karachi airport project as the chief architect. It was an involvement lasting almost a decade. We worked initially with German consultants. I spent the summer in Frankfurt at Frankfurt airport. The German team came back to Pakistan and worked in the NESPAC office. Working with Pakistani colleagues was one experience. Working with Germans was a completely different human experience. They had girlfriend problems in the school, in the office, sorry. They had all kinds of peculiar things which we had never encountered in our working life. And those guys, as a team, they didn't trust each other. We stood for our teammates. We respected them, we supported them, and we believed them. But the Germans were so individualistic, they would set up a meeting for 2 minutes past 12, and if we were a minute late, they would be screaming. But when it came to the design of the building, they weren't bothered what it looked like or what it represented. And to me, it was a very important project because it's the first thing that you encounter when you arrive in Pakistan or depart. It's like a gateway to the country. And I felt that it should express the character and features of the place where it belonged, at the same time be a modern building. To the Germans, it was like a machine. If they got all the parts moving and working together, it didn't matter what it looked like. It could be as clumsy and clunky as they cared. But when our experience with the consulting stage was completed, we had a group of French contractors building it. My next experience was with the French. Their concept of time, their concept of discipline, much more easygoing, relaxed, a different culture again. So each time this happened, work itself changed. I mean, our relationship to our work changed. The French would set up a meeting for 12:30, and at 12:20 they would call and say, we're 15 minutes late. तो हम यही कहते ठीक है भाई हो आ जाना.
देसी स्टाइल.
हाँ, वेरी देसी. लेकिन साइट पे जो काम होता था वो पूरा मॉडर्न तरीक़ों से होता था. कोई गधा गाड़ी नहीं नज़र आती थी. एक वक्त वहाँ कराची एयरपोर्ट प्रोजेक्ट पे 15 टावर क्रेन्स लगे हुए थे. पूरे कराची में आप गिन लें तो कभी 15 टावर क्रेन्स आपको शायद नहीं मिलेंगे. एक्सकवेशन पूरा मैकेनिकल हुआ. उसका बेसमेंट है तकरीबन 40 फुट गहरा. उसका फ्लोर एरिया है 1 मिलियन स्क्वायर फीट. 1 मिलियन स्क्वायर फीट की बिल्डिंग छोटी मोटी चीज़ तो नहीं है ना. इट हैज़ इट्स ओन सिग्निफिकेंस. इत्तेफाक से उसी पीरियड में 2 और प्रोजेक्ट्स कराची में बन रहे थे जो इतने ही बड़े थे. मुख्तलिफ चीज़ें थी. लेकिन एक था आगा खान हॉस्पिटल, वो भी तकरीबन मिलियन स्क्वायर फुट का था, और एक था फाइनेंस एंड ट्रेड सेंटर शाहराह फैसल पे, वो भी मिलियन स्क्वायर फुट की बिल्डिंग. एक ऑफिस बिल्डिंग है, एक हॉस्पिटल है, एक एयरपोर्ट है. लेकिन एयरपोर्ट की कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी अपनी जगह और है, बिकॉज उसमें इतने मुख्तलिफ़ किस्म के लोग आ रहे होते हैं, जा रहे होते हैं, काम कर रहे होते हैं. उसका ओनर कौन है, उसके गाइडलाइन ब्रीफिंग कौन देगा, उसको अप्रूव कौन करेगा, उसको सस्टेन और मेंटेन कौन करेगा, वो एक बड़ी कॉम्प्लेक्स सिनारियो है जिसको हमने फिर ठीक से मैनेज नहीं किया है. आज जो हाल हो रहा है, मुझे थोड़ा अफसोस होता है जब कराची एयरपोर्ट जाता हूँ और इस्तेमाल करता हूँ तो. बट मे बी दैट्स गेटिंग वेरी पर्सनल.
Is there one important thing that you wanted that didn't happen with Karachi airport?
Yes, we wanted very strongly that this big building should contain examples of Pakistani artwork. मैंने बहुत कोशिश की, मैंने लड़ा, मैं सिविल एविएशन के साथ मैंने बहस की. मैंने कहा ये इतनी बड़ी बड़ी दीवारें आपको कहीं मिलेंगी नहीं, इसके ऊपर स्कल्पचर होना चाहिए, पेंटिंग्स होनी चाहिए. लेकिन किसी को आर्ट की कदर ही नहीं थी और ना कोई कहने वाला था. और मुल्कों में तो बाय लॉ you have to invest at least 5% or whatever of the cost of the project in national artwork. यहाँ न आर्ट की कदर है, न आर्किटेक्चर की कदर है. तो जब वो हमें पता चला कि नहीं हो सकेगा, तो फिर मैंने अपने तौर पे एज ए डिज़ाइनर, एज एन इंटीरियर डिज़ाइनर, उसको जितना डेकोरेट कर सकते थे और उसमें जितनी चीज़ें हम इंस्टॉल कर सकते थे एज पार्ट ऑफ बिल्डिंग रादर देन इन द नेम ऑफ आर्ट, वो हमने डाली. और जब नया बना था तो न दुबई एयरपोर्ट था, न बॉम्बे एयरपोर्ट था, न दिल्ली एयरपोर्ट था, नथिंग टू टॉक अबाउट. कराची एयरपोर्ट वाज समथिंग special in 1992.
Absolutely, yes.
We've lost out on that for various other reasons, but that's part of another story.
तो वक्त ख़त्म होने वाला है, बट आपके साथ और आपके मेमोir के बारे में बात नहीं हो सकती without talking about his I don't know what to, better half, but equal half.
Much better half.
His partner, everybody's beloved Romana Husain, designer, educationist, writer, activist. I've requested her to read a small portion also from the book, which is about her.
Okay, so can you hear me? Yes. So this is very personal, and it comes more than halfway through the book. Okay, he doesn't mention me. He does mention me before, but he says more about her later. So this is the later part. Romana enters my life. Towards the end of 1976, as my sister was about to embark on her journey, she and my mother took the bold step to set me up with someone special. Thus it was that Romana Malik entered my life. Our mothers knew each other slightly, and a few months earlier, they had met at a Karachi wedding. My mother learned that Romana was an artist and graphic designer. She began to think that I might be persuaded to meet her. Romana was away in Canada for a year, but as expected, back soon. The mothers kept in touch. Thus, on a fall afternoon, my mother and sister went to see Romana, who, by the way, had no inkling of their intentions. My sister was thrilled. She told me that she had found the perfect match for me, and if I needed her help, this was my last chance. Shortly after that, she left for the US. But Romana was not one to be inspected by a prospective suitor, and I would have to meet her on some pretext. It was agreed that I would pretend to seek her professional advice on an advert I had designed. It was a sly thing to do. Our first meeting was therefore set up at her aunt's home, and I showed up casually after work. The ad was for Zor engineers to be included in a brochure for the forthcoming Christmas bazaar at the Trinity Cathedral compound. I had already done a rendering for it, which made her wonder why I was asking her advice and why the Trinity Cathedral. Because this was a project I was working on. Let me explain. The Holy Trinity Cathedral was built in 1885 in local yellow limestone with timber roofing. Over time, the timber in the roof, although entirely teak, became infested with termites. The salvageable teak, if sold, would, however, provide the funds to replace the entire roof in a more maintenance-free material. I had considered several design alternatives on a scale model, and finally a concrete barrel vault roof was constructed, which you see today. While I had gone to meet Romana alone, her aunt, a pediatrician, her aunt's husband, and Romana's father, Hashim Malik, were present during our first casual meeting. Romana's father had attended school in Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh, and then Sydenham College in Bombay. After migrating to Pakistan, he had ventured into business with friends who had also migrated. Our conversation revolved around Romana's year-long stay in Canada with her beloved Dadi Jan and her uncle, Dr. Hatim Malik, a neurosurgeon. Romana was born in Karachi and graduated in design from the Central Institute of Arts and Crafts and had enrolled for a course in television production and direction while in Canada. She talked about her travels and visits to the galleries and museums in DC and New York City. I was intrigued as I left, wondering what the next step should be. Romana soon learnt about my real intention. We agreed to meet a few weeks later. Our second meeting took place at her parents' apartment. I was dressed in my old and worn denim jeans and turtleneck. She was also in her house casuals. We sat in her drawing room, just the two of us, exploring our common interests. She showed me slides of her artwork on a handheld slide viewer. I told her of my time in Turkey, travels in Europe, and about my work. As she spoke warmly of her love for the French Impressionists, in particular Degas' ballerinas, something inside me began to tingle. I was getting drawn to her almost beyond control. Now the rest I leave to you, but this is a very edited version that I have read you out because there is no time. Thank you, Aliya.
Thank you, Romana. Thank you everyone for being here. Time is done, but we have the book right there. We purposefully didn't keep Q&A so that we could give you more of a flavor of the book. अब आपके जहन में जो भी सवाल रह गए किताब ख़रीद के जवाब मिलेंगे तो मुख्तार साहब वहाँ मेज़ पे बैठेंगे. If you would like your book signed, please do so.
Aliya, thank you very much for a wonderful discussion, and thank you everybody who has taken the time and trouble to come and listen to me. बहुत शुक्रिया.